It's time now to review headlines of today's newspapers.
Yes, it is. And of course, we are starting with this day. The first, headline that catches my attention here is the Supreme Court paves way for fresh criminal forfeiture actions against Abacha family.
For this, I'm as blind as a bat, so I kind of have to read. Yes. This is sort of like the family that seems to keep giving, isn't it? It's almost as if they've sort of like
it's a bottomless
acted as a savings account for Nigeria. You know, every sort of administration, I think, sort of in the last how many years, has been able to sort of get money back from them. And I mean, we can sort of laugh about it and say they were sort of, you know, saving money for Nigeria and all that. But the truth is that this is a serious matter. It's about abuse of office and self-enrichment, using public office. And it sort of harkens back to the conversation we had earlier, where I said the reasons why we keep seeing, you know, a lot of corruption in public office is because the penalty for it is not reflective of the seriousness of the crime, in my view. I think corruption is actually a crime that kills. You know, in fact, I think the word corruption sort of makes it sound really elevated. It's theft. They are stealing. They're stealing. And they're stealing people's futures. They're stealing people's lives. So if you take out money that should go to sort of build a primary healthcare system, you're essentially basically saying people who need healthcare cannot get it. Babies are dying. So if you look at sort of our country, we have very high infant mortality rate. We have, you know, mothers who are sort of pregnant dying. You've got sort of childhood diseases that don't kill in other places, killing people. And part of it is that our primary healthcare system is a bit abysmal. And it's because a lot of the money that should go towards healthcare, towards education, is ending up in private pockets. In places like China, they pass the death penalty, you know, for corruption. I think Nigeria needs to go there.
It definitely needs to do that. And what catches my eye is even the byline on here that says the federal government can now recommence investigations into corruption allegations against the family. Is the evidence on ground not enough?
How long does it take? You know what I mean? And this is unfortunately just one case. So if you look at sort of what progressively keeps happening, is that the corruption even seems to be getting worse instead of getting better. Again, it harkens back to the corrupt people do a risk assessment. You know what I mean? Okay, if I steal, and I've heard people say this, if you're going to steal a lot. Because if you steal a lot, you may be able to navigate the legal system, the judiciary, and all that, and at the end of the day, come out still better off than sort of when you started. And I think that is really fundamentally where the problem is. We must begin to deal with corruption for the sort of serious crime that it is. It is, in my view, it's a capital crime, and must carry like punishment that is commensurate with the damage it does to the environment.
Definitely. If we look at the top, there's still on this day newspaper, in dialogue with Economic Summit Group, Tinubu says nothing wrong with endless budget deficits. You did say I was invited. You were invited
so
to
I was
this,
actually
to tell us more.
At this particular event. And yeah, no, I think the point he was making, and I kind of tend to agree with him, is that budget deficits tend to be sort of a natural part of sort of countries. The problem with Nigeria's budget deficit is that they are not funding production. They're not funding things that are adding value. We are having budget deficits because we're taking money and funding what you call a recurrent expenditure, so not capital expenditure. We're not building anything with a lot of our deficits. We're paying salaries, we're paying for consumption, we're paying allowances of people to travel, their tea, their coffee, you know what I mean? And to reduce it to its sort of most basic. And the idea is that if you're going to have a budget deficit, if you're going to be in the negative, then you have to say, what is that money being used for? If it is used to sort of create jobs, if it is used to make you productive as a country, then it is perfectly acceptable. And I think, if I remember correctly, he gave an example of a place like Japan, for example, that has sort of operates a budget deficit. So he's talking about, what do we do? with money that we borrow. How do we get into deficit? We get into deficit doing rubbish things, or we get into deficit with productivity. Definitely. Yeah.
All right then. So do you want to let's move on to the next newspaper on there? We have The Guardian.
Yes.
I mean, we have spoken about this earlier today, but the top headline there reads: Kidnappers and vandals threaten $4.12 billion railway infrastructure
that we haven't paid for, right? So this is why insecurity is a national emergency and should have been, in my view, declared a national emergency, because without security, nothing else you do matters. You can build roads, you can build, highways, bridges, and all of that. But if people are not able to sort of use those both for sort of economic activities, but also social life, social cohesion, ability to stay with family, move to visit family, all of the things that infrastructure does, then it's a waste of money. Yes, right. So you're paying debt for something that is not actually functioning for you the way it is designed to do. It's an utter disaster. It is.
Just to pull your attention to this story down at the bottom, it says here, Nigerians have forgotten that they are stronger together. That's an interview.
Yeah, and I want to see who it is. It says page 7.
Just quickly go in there.
Who is it that? Oningia Erokosima, the founder and president of the Foundation for Peace and Nonviolence in Nigeria. He's spot on. I tell you why I get very frustrated with the way our politics work. Nigerian politicians have become very, very good at divide and rule, to the extent that now people can't hold them accountable. Because people who are divided cannot hold those in charge accountable. Because you start talking about, for example, if you talk about corruption now, people will say, what about? So whataboutism has become something that we use in our natural life, right? What about him? Okay, he stole 50 million. What about the one that stole 100 million? Okay, let's arrest the one that first did the 50 million. It is a step in the right direction. And the problem is that lack of unity. We've forgotten that essentially poverty, for example, does not know tribe. If people are hungry, if you go to the market and you're buying gari, you're not going to buy it cheaper because you're Hausa Fulani or you're Yoruba or you're Igbo. Inflation, across everybody. Bad governance affects everybody. But if you're not united, you're not going to be able to hold people accountable. I mean, I was on the platform October 1st, and this was the theme of the talk that I gave. I even illustrated it with, a stick. Where as children, there was that story of a father that brings, 2-3 sticks, puts them together, gives to the children and says, break them, and they can't. But the minute the sticks are sort of separated,
then it's easier
easy to break them. And I think that's the problem that we have found ourselves in Nigeria. Effectively, we've been divided along our fault lines of tribe, of religion, and it only serves one purpose. And that purpose is to ensure that we can come together as a people and hold those who are actually mismanaging this country, raping this country accountable. So I think he's spot on this.
Definitely spot on. And it's definitely something to consider considering the upcoming elections. Now we're moving on to Saturday's Punch, and it reads the top headline there: New Naira, banks, customers pressure CBN to shift January 31st deadline. There has been so much back and forth regarding these new notes.
Yes.
I personally, I've been to the bank a number of times and I've not been able to lay my hands on it.
And that's what is so weird about this deadline. I went to an ATM 2 days ago, and they're still issuing the old notes, right? In my own case, I got a mixture of the old notes and the new notes. And I'm saying, if you're saying to people that you don't want, those old notes in circulation, one would expect that by now, whatever you issue has got to be new, so that you are gradually, removing the old notes from circulation. But why are banks still issuing in the ATMs and in the banks when people go to take out cash, these old notes. And it's the reason I guess people will be a little bit confused and say, well, is this deadline going to work? Do we need a little bit more time? But of course, this also references not you and I, you know, people who do have money, but there are people who are keeping big money at home that may need to sort of a bit more time to sort of, yes, put that in the sort of banking system. I generally think the principle of what they were trying to do is good. I am not too sure about the implementation. I think I understand how, you know, putting out new notes can sort of help with insecurity, for example. You know, kidnappers who've collected millions of naira and are stashing it away somewhere in the bush will now be worried about, like, you know, they will lose the value of that and whatever. Having said that, when you do currency changes, you tend to give a lot of leeway in other places. You will do a lot of education, a lot of communication, telling people what you're doing, how you're doing it, and allow a period, a reasonable period. So I think the timeline was too tight, and which is why I think you've seen all of that criticism trailing it. Yes.
I was reading a story about, you know, obviously public transportation, the form of currency exchange is right there. You have to pay for it, and then a passenger hands out the new naira note, and the conductor refuses to take that from him because, like, you know what, I don't recognize this. So it makes you wonder.
Monopoly money, but I think part of the problem is that not enough was done to sort of publicize what was going to happen, but also even the look and of the new note, so that people are educated. I didn't hear the radio announcements. I didn't see any TV ads of any sort of extensive period. And this is a country of almost 200 million people. So you have got to make an effort to share information.
That information definitely has to trickle down. We did speak about this very briefly, a PVC palaver.
Yes.
Registered voters, still on the Punch, registered voters recount hitches, frustrations, collecting cards. With just 43 days left.
It's been extended though. So, you know, I think INEC is listening, right? Yes. Because the deadline for sort of collection has now been extended, and so that's a good thing.
Yes.
But like I said, I think the lesson from this is, please do not wait until sort of 30 days, 40 days to an election to start rushing, you know, to do these things. Can we sort of stagger this process throughout, you know, the 4 years in the lead up to elections? So do not stop issuing.
The very last minute.
Do not start registering people only last minute. Do not, you know, start issuing cards. And you people, go and pick up your cards. Don't wait until it's almost election time to be able to do this.
All right, then. Yeah. So we're moving on now to the Saturday Tribune. The headline there reads, in Northern states, politicians buying PVCs in opponents' strongholds. The byline there reads, protect your votes from prowling politicians. And of course, count us, APC and PDP is saying, count us out of the heist.
So I have a problem with this headline. You know, I have a problem with media that sort of tries to sort of do regional divisions and regional headlines. If you read this in northern states, it almost suggests that southern politicians are saints and they don't engage in this sort of things. And this is, you know, for me, I have a problem with this particular kind of journalism. I think you could report that politicians are buying PVCs without making it a regional thing, because we know politicians across north, south, east, and west tend to have similar characteristics when it comes to elections, you know, so I don't want to spend too much time on this.
All right, then, so let's move on to the Saturday Vanguard. The top headline there reads, CSOs, activists, clerics hope Buhari's assurance on free and fair polls may not feel like the 2015 promises. I remember 2015, about 2 weeks left to the elections was when we found out that it was postponement, of course, because of how bad the Boko Haram insecurities were at the time. We're hopeful at this point.
To be fair to this president, and he's been criticized for a lot of things, and rightfully so, including issues around insecurity. But on the issue of INEC reforms, I think we will look back and see that this government has done fairly well in sort of putting processes. So the new law, for example, that has come into place, the changes around the transmission of votes electronically, all of those reforms, I think, are increasingly giving us a process that is going to be fair and produce more credible elections. The problem is, will people come out to vote? So that issue about whether insecurity, people will feel safe enough to actually come for that new improved process to work, people have to vote.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the concerns are, ensuring that you secure areas, you give people the confidence to come out knowing that they will not be harmed, they will not be attacked, neither by kidnappers, neither by Boko Haram, no political thugs, so voter suppression, all of those things. I think that's where the issue lies. But I think the process itself with the new electoral law and everything is sort of much better than what we had in 2019 and of course 2015.
Definitely. Yeah. All right, then let's move on to our next.
There's Afrima here.
Oh yes, Afrima. Last. I just saw that last online to nick it for Burna Boy. I mean, everybody.
So Steve Ayorinde is at
Afrima.
Which is why
major entertainment or lifestyle personality is in Dakar, Senegal,
right.
for Afrima, which is one of the biggest African music award shows.
Which I'm very proud of because it was started here locally.
Yes.
It's a Nigerian sort of festival, driven by Nigerian people who started it, then took it continental, and it has become. I mean, they probably won't invite me now because I'm not big enough. But I think the second or the third Afrima Awards, I presented an award to Kiss Daniels before he became this massive star that he was. So it's kind of nice to see it grow from something small that was started locally to this global thing. Yeah, I'm very jealous of Steve.
Yes, and I'm not surprised as well that Burna Boy, of course, Last was one of the biggest songs.
Yeah, I'm
from
angling for an
2022.
invitation, as you can tell.
I think next year we're definitely going to be on there. Okay. And just to touch on, what's going on with Afrima right now, actually, there's a lot of call for, there's a particular award that's supposed to be going, I think it's Song of the Year or Album of the Year, it's supposed to be going out to Brimo, who is a huge musician here in Nigeria, but there have been calls for that award to be, for him not to receive that award because he has gone online to make certain comments that that Nigerians consider divisive. So at this point, Is
that the case, or is it because he's come out to openly support a candidate that people online don't like?
Oh, no. There are certain things that he said on Twitter that I can't repeat on air.
Okay.
But it's
I've sort of stayed away from Twitter for a little while. I go in now, post a few things, and then I disappear. So I'm not quite on top of.
We miss you on Twitter, but that's it for Saturday Vanguard. We're almost up. This is the very last paper, the Saturday Telegraph.
Yes.
On here, the major headline reads: the APC Guba candidates in Oyo, Rivers, and others are unhappy. They say the ruling party win opposition G5 governors instead of supporting them.
This is very interesting, right? Where basically your bird in hand, and instead of you to sort of focus on consolidating the bird in hand, you're becoming a little bit greedy and reaching out. I think that's the allegation. The G5 governors and all of that is happening is, I find their position a little bit weird.
Why is that?
Because some of them are running as senators. The presidential elections are taking place at the same time. And I find it difficult to believe, particularly in rural areas, maybe not the urban, that you can guide your members enough to say, do not vote for Atiku Abubakar, who we don't like because of these issues we have, but vote for me as senator. There will be utter confusion. So I worry that their fight, they might end up shooting themselves in the foot. And I think their refusal to actually make a decision in the end is going to hurt them. You know what I mean? We're, like you said, 45 days to elections and nobody's really sure where they stand. 1 minute there are rumors that they're going to go with the APC candidate. The next minute is that, they're going with the Labour candidate. I think that sort of uncertainty confuses voters. And for some of them that are on the ballot paper, they may rue the day that they decided to sort of allow this to ride for so long, because they may end up paying a price for that uncertainty, because voters will just get confused and not know what to do.
Definitely. There is a headline on here just by the left. I mean, we all heard the news of the murdered lawyer Bolanle Rahim last year, and it's on here. Her burial is set for January 17th. I think that was, I mean, we've had a lot of cases of police brutality, but I think this was one that really shook Nigerians to the core. I think it happened on Christmas, maybe Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, to know that, you know, amidst everything that is going on, she's finally being laid to rest on January 17th.
I honestly think this is so tragic, and it's so sad for her, for her family. But you see, beyond the individual issue, what worries me is how much we've become immune to violence. We've normalized it now. So these stories are happening more and more. The level of outrage, you know, 1 day, 2 days, and then it's gone again. Because there's a part of us that has become used to violence.